At Thanksgiving, my mom mocked me. You still driving that old truck? My parents and brother laughed, but what they didn't know was that I owned 15 trucks and ran my own company. So I paid cash for a mansion and exposed my brother's six-figure debt. Now they're begging. Hey Reddit, I've been putting off writing this for months, but after everything that went down at Thanksgiving, I need to get this off my chest. This is going to be long, but trust me, it's worth the read. I 34 male, and for the past 15 years, my family has treated me like the biggest disappointment in 3 generations. Why? Because I chose what they call a boring career in logistics and transportation. While my younger brother Kevin, 29, has been jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, I've been quietly building something real, something they never bothered to ask about. But let me start from the beginning, because the family dynamics didn't just appear overnight. Growing up, our parents, Mom 58 and Dad 61, made it crystal clear who the golden child was. Kevin was the charismatic one, the social butterfly, the kid who could charm teachers into giving him extensions and talk his way out of trouble. Me, I was the quiet, methodical one who actually did his homework on time and never caused drama. You'd think parents would appreciate having one easy kid, right? Wrong. Apparently, being reliable is boring. Being responsible is forgettable. Kevin's wild stories about sneaking out, getting caught drinking, or failing tests because he was too busy living life became dinner table entertainment. My story about getting promoted to shift supervisor at the warehouse where I worked summers? That's nice, honey. Kevin, tell us about that girl you met at the beach. The pattern was set early and it never changed. Kevin was the star. I was the supporting character in my own family's story. When I graduated high school, I had a choice. I could take out massive student loans to go to college like Kevin did, majoring in something impractical like communications while partying for 4 years. Or I could start working full-time at the logistics company where I'd been doing part-time work, learning the business from the ground up. I chose the latter. Big mistake, according to my family. You're wasting your potential, Mom said when I told them my decision. Look at Kevin, he's going to get a real education, make real connections. You're going to be stuck loading trucks your whole life. Dad was worse. I didn't work 60-hour weeks so my son could waste his life in some warehouse. Kevin's going to be somebody. He's got ambition. The thing is, I did have ambition. Huge ambition. I just wasn't interested in broadcasting it to people who wouldn't understand anyway. I started at Peterson Logistics making $12 an hour sorting packages. But I paid attention to everything. How the routes were organized, which drivers were efficient, why certain deliveries always ran late, how fuel costs affected profitability. I asked questions. I volunteered for overtime. I learned how to drive the big rigs during slow periods. Within 2 years, I was a dispatcher. Within 4, I was managing routes for the entire Northeast corridor. By year 6, I was assistant operations manager, making more money than Kevin would see for years after college. But did my family know or care? Hell no. Every family gathering was the same routine. Kevin would waltz in with stories about his fraternity, his internships, his big plans after graduation. Meanwhile, I'd get the obligatory, "How's the truck driving going, Mike?" followed by immediate topic changes. The worst part was how they'd introduce me to people. This is our son, Mike. He works in transportation. And this is Kevin. He's studying business at State, going to run his own company someday. Kevin, meanwhile, was accumulating debt like it was a hobby. Student loans, credit cards, that car his parents co-signed for because he needed something reliable for his internships. But hey, at least he wasn't just driving trucks like his boring brother. After Kevin graduated, the comparisons got even worse. He bounced from job to job, each one supposedly a stepping stone to bigger things. Sales associate at a tech startup that folded in 6 months. Marketing coordinator at a wellness company that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Account manager at a firm that laid him off after 8 months. But every failure was spun as experience and networking and finding his passion. Meanwhile, I'd been promoted to operations manager, was earning a 6-figure salary, and had started making plans to break out on my own. The truck thing became their favorite running joke. I drove a 2003 Chevy Silverado that I'd bought, used, and maintained meticulously. It wasn't pretty, but it was reliable and paid off. To them, it was proof that I'd never amount to anything. "Mike, when are you going to get a real car?" Kevin would ask at every family barbecue, standing next to his leased BMW that cost more per month than my mortgage payment. "That thing's older than some of my co-workers." Mom would chime in with her concerned voice. "Honey, I worry about you driving that old truck. What if it breaks down? Don't you want something newer, something that shows you're doing well?" The answer was always the same. The truck worked fine. I didn't care about impressing people, and I had better things to spend money on. They'd exchange those looks, the ones that said, "Poor Mike, no ambition, no pride in his appearance." If they'd bothered to ask what those better things were, they might have learned something interesting, like the fact that I was saving every possible penny, learning everything I could about the trucking industry, and identifying opportunities that bigger companies were too slow or too arrogant to see. The independent contractor drivers who worked with Peterson were always complaining about the same things: unreliable dispatch, poor route planning, equipment that broke down constantly, and companies that treated them like disposable assets instead of partners. I saw a business opportunity. When I was 28, I made my move. I left Peterson and started M&D Transport with my buddy Danny, who'd been driving for 15 years and knew every highway, truck stop, and shortcut between Maine and Florida. We started with one truck, a used Peterbilt that we bought with our combined savings and a small business loan. Our model was simple: treat drivers like partners, maintain equipment properly, use technology for efficient routing, and build relationships with shippers who valued reliability over rock-bottom prices. We targeted medium-distance hauls that the big companies found less profitable.
I got this old thing and the bill from the store where I got it. Figured you could beat it with a better deal on one of these big boys.
That doesn't work that way.
Well, at Verizon, anyone can bring in their AT&T or T-Mobile bill and they'll give you a better deal.
I thought Verizon was pricey.
No, better deal, best 5G network. Back to the TV. Does it come higher than 8K? Because I don't like...
But we could handle efficiently. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, sleeping in the truck cab, eating gas station food, and wondering if we'd made the biggest mistake of our lives. But by month 10, we were consistently profitable. By year 2, we had 3 trucks. By year 4, we had 8 trucks and were consistently booked solid. My family had no idea. None. Not because I was hiding it, but because they never asked specifics about my work. When they asked how the truck driving was going, I'd say fine or busy, and they'd immediately pivot to Kevin's latest venture or relationship drama. The contrast with Kevin's career was becoming comical. While I was building a legitimate business with real assets and steady growth, he was chasing trends and get-rich-quick schemes. First, it was cryptocurrency day trading. Then, it was drop-shipping products from China. Then, it was becoming a social media influencer for entrepreneur lifestyle content. Each new venture came with big announcements at family dinners. Kevin would explain his brilliant new strategy, complete with projected earnings and plans for scaling up. Our parents would ooh and ah and ask detailed questions and tell everyone they knew about Kevin's latest innovative business idea. Meanwhile, I'd quietly grown M&D Transport to 15 trucks, employed 22 people, and was generating annual revenue that would have shocked them speechless if they'd known. But truck driving was boring, so they never asked for details. The mansion purchase was what finally broke the camel's back. By last year, the business was doing well enough that I started looking for a house to buy. Not just any house. I wanted something that reflected what I'd built. Something that said, "I made it," without having to say it out loud. I found a 6,800 square foot colonial on 12 acres, about 20 minutes from where I grew up. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was unmistakably successful. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, gourmet kitchen, 3-car garage, pool, and a view that went on for miles. The price tag was $1.2 million. I paid cash. No mortgage, no financing, no debt. Just a wire transfer from my business account to theirs. Did I tell my family immediately? Of course not. Why break a 15-year streak of them not being interested in my life? I moved in quietly over a weekend in September. Danny and some of the other guys from work helped me move furniture and get settled. We had a barbecue that first Saturday night, sitting on my back deck, looking out over my property, and talking about how far we'd come since those early days of sleeping in truck cabs. The plan was to tell my family at Thanksgiving. Not make a big announcement, just casually mention that I'd bought a house and see how long it took them to ask where or what kind. I figured it would be amusing to watch their assumptions play out. But Kevin beat me to the punch with his own Thanksgiving announcement. 2 weeks before the holiday, Mom called with exciting news. Kevin has something wonderful to share with everyone at Thanksgiving. He's finally found his calling. He's starting an import business, bringing artisanal goods from South America to boutique stores here. He's already got investors lined up. Great, I thought. Another Kevin venture for everyone to fawn over while I sat quietly eating turkey and mashed potatoes. But this one felt different. Mom was more excited than usual, and she kept mentioning how Kevin had really done his research this time, and how the numbers looked amazing, and how this could be the big break he's been working toward. I figured I'd let Kevin have his moment, then casually mentioned my house purchase afterward. What I didn't expect was for the whole thing to blow up in the most spectacular way possible. Thanksgiving started normally enough. Kevin showed up in his BMW, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was practically bouncing with excitement, barely able to contain whatever big announcement he was planning. I arrived in my trusty Silverado, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. The reactions were predictable. "Mike, you're still driving that old truck?" Kevin laughed, shaking his head. "Dude, it's embarrassing. What are you, too cheap to buy something from this decade?" Dad chimed in with his concerned parent voice. "Son, that truck's got to be costing you more in repairs than a car payment would. Wouldn't it make sense to get something reliable?" "It is reliable," I said, same as always. "Runs fine, gets me where I need to go." They exchanged those familiar looks. Poor Mike, no pride, no ambition, driving around in that old beater like he's still 25. During dinner, Kevin couldn't wait any longer. He practically vibrated with excitement as he cleared his throat for his big announcement. "Everyone, I have incredible news. I found my calling, my big break, the business opportunity I've been waiting for." He paused dramatically. "I'm launching Artisan Imports, specializing in handcrafted goods from South American artisans. Think pottery, textiles, jewelry, all authentic, all unique, all targeted at high-end boutique stores." The table erupted in excitement. Mom started crying happy tears. Dad raised his wine glass for a toast. My aunt and uncle asked detailed questions about the business model, the market opportunity, the growth potential. Kevin ate it up. He explained how he'd identified an underserved niche, how he'd already connected with artisans in Peru and Colombia, how he'd lined up potential retail partners. He pulled out his phone and showed pictures of beautiful pottery and colorful textiles. "The initial investment is significant," he said, "but the profit margins are incredible. We're talking about 400% markups on authentic artisan goods that cost almost nothing to produce but retail for premium prices here." "How much initial investment?" Dad asked.
Almost done.
Come on, man.
Kevin's smile got even bigger. "I need $180,000 to get started. Inventory, shipping, business licenses, marketing, the whole package. But I've already got investors who believe in the vision." Mom squeezed his hand. "We're so proud of you, Kevin. This sounds amazing." Then Kevin dropped the bomb. "Actually, Mom and Dad are my lead investors. They're putting in $120,000 to get things started. They believe in me that much." The table went quiet. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. $120,000. That was a huge chunk of money for my parents, who lived comfortably but had never been wealthy. Where did they get that kind of cash? Dad cleared his throat. "We took out a home equity loan. Kevin's business plan is so solid, we couldn't pass up the opportunity to be part of his success." My stomach dropped. They'd borrowed against their house to fund Kevin's latest scheme. Their house, the one they'd worked 30 years to pay off, was now collateral for Kevin's import business. But everyone else was still celebrating. My aunt called it a smart investment in family. My uncle praised Kevin's entrepreneurial spirit. My cousin asked if Kevin needed any additional investors. That's when Mom turned to me with her familiar pitying smile. "Mike, honey, you should think about Kevin's business. Maybe there's a way you could be involved too. Your truck driving contacts might know people who need authentic decorative pieces for their offices." The whole table chuckled. "Yeah, let me ask the warehouse guys if they want $200 Peruvian pottery for their break rooms." "Actually," I said quietly, "I've got some news too." Kevin barely looked up from his phone, where he was showing more product photos. "What's that?" "I bought a house." "That's nice," Mom said absently, focused on Kevin's phone screen. "Where?" "Riverside Estates." Now I had their attention. Riverside Estates was the nicest neighborhood in our area. Houses there started at $800,000 and went up from there. Kevin looked up from his phone. "You mean like a condo in Riverside? I didn't know they had any affordable units there." "Not a condo, a house. 6,800 square feet, 12 acres. Dead silence. Dad frowned. "What do you mean you bought a house there?" "Those places cost $1.2 million. Paid cash." You could have heard a pin drop. Kevin's mouth hung open. Mom's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Dad just stared at me like I'd announced I was actually an alien. That's not possible, Kevin said finally. You drive trucks. There's no way you have that kind of money. I pulled out my phone and showed them the real estate listing I'd saved. Their faces went through a range of expressions as they scrolled through pictures of my kitchen, my master suite, my 3-car garage, my pool. How? Dad whispered. I own a trucking company, M&D Transport. 15 trucks, 22 employees, $7 million in annual revenue. Kevin's face went white. What? I've owned it for 6 years. Started with 1 truck, built it up. We specialize in medium haul freight, focus on reliability and customer service. It's been pretty successful. The questions came rapid fire after that. How long had I owned a company? Why didn't I tell them? What exactly did the business do? How much money was I making? I answered everything honestly. How I'd seen an opportunity and seized it. How I'd reinvested profits back into the business instead of spending money on flashy cars or expensive clothes. How I'd built something real and sustainable instead of chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Kevin got more agitated with every answer. This doesn't make sense. You've been driving that old truck, living in that tiny apartment. I moved out of the apartment 3 months ago. The truck's for sentimental reasons. It was my first work vehicle, and I never saw the point in flashy displays when I was building a business. That's when Kevin made his biggest mistake. Instead of congratulating me or asking how I'd done it, he got defensive and angry. This is bullshit, he snapped. You're making this up to steal attention from my announcement. Show me proof. I showed him proof. Bank statements, business registration documents, photos of my trucks with the company logo. Kevin's face got redder with each piece of evidence. You've been lying to us for years, he accused. Pretending to be some poor truck driver while you're actually rich? What kind of sick game is that? I never lied about anything. You all just never bothered to ask specifics about my work. Every time someone asked how the truck driving was going, I said busy or going well, and you'd immediately change the subject to Kevin's latest venture. Mom looked hurt. But honey, why didn't you tell us? Tell you what, that I owned a business. I tried to talk about work at family dinners for years. Remember when I mentioned expanding operations? You said, that's nice, Kevin. Tell us about your internship. Remember when I talked about hiring more drivers? Dad changed the subject to ask Kevin about his grades. The room was getting tense. My uncle tried to lighten the mood by asking about the house, but Kevin wasn't done. This is typical Mike, he said bitterly. Always has to one-up everyone. Can't stand that I finally found something big, so he has to make up some fantasy about being successful. That pushed me over the edge. Makeup? Kevin, you want to talk about financial reality? Let's talk about it. I pulled out my phone and opened the business credit monitoring app I used to check on potential clients and partners. What's your social security number, Kevin? Why? Let's see how financially successful you really are. Kevin went pale. That's private. Come on, big successful entrepreneur. Nothing to hide, right? Dad stepped in. Boys, let's not. But I was done being the quiet, dismissed brother. Kevin's been talking about his big import business, how it's going to make him rich. Let me guess. You've never actually run a business before, have you? Never had employees, never had to make payroll, never had to manage cash flow? Kevin's silence was answer enough. I continued. And this $180,000 you need. That's not just for inventory, is it? That's to pay off your existing debt so you can start fresh. More silence. How much debt are you in, Kevin? Credit cards, student loans, car lease, all of it. Kevin stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. But I was just getting started. Because I'm guessing it's significant. The BMW lease, the expensive apartment, the designer clothes, the lifestyle you can't actually afford. What's the total? 60,000? 80? Kevin's face was red with rage and embarrassment. Shut up, Mike! Higher! Jesus, Kevin, how much?
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand, your opportunity, your breakthrough. Feeling a vibe? Run with it. From can't look away to gotta have it.
That's when he cracked. It's not that much. The credit cards are only at $43,000, and the student loans are almost paid down to $67,000, and the car is just $18,000 left. And he stopped, realizing he'd just confessed to being over $128,000 in debt in front of the entire family. The silence was deafening. Dad's face went through several color changes. $128,000 in debt? Kevin, you told us you were financially stable. You said the business investment was going to make us all rich. Mom looked like she might faint. You didn't tell us about any debt when you asked us to invest. Kevin tried to recover. It's not debt, it's leveraging. All successful entrepreneurs use leverage. The import business will pay everything off and more. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Kevin, do you know what happens to most import businesses in their first year? Do you know anything about international trade regulations, customs procedures, currency exchange risks, or seasonal demand fluctuations? He didn't answer. Have you actually talked to any retailers about carrying your products? Do you have signed agreements, purchase orders, anything concrete? Still nothing. Because from where I sit, this looks like another one of your schemes. Except this time, you've convinced our parents to risk their house on it. Dad stood up slowly. Kevin, is that true? Is this another get-rich-quick idea? Kevin's voice got smaller. I've done research. I've looked at market opportunities. The profit margins are real. Have you ever imported anything before? I pressed. Do you know how to handle customs clearance? Do you understand the tax implications? Have you researched your competition? Each question hit like a hammer. Kevin's confident entrepreneur facade crumbled piece by piece. Finally, he exploded. Not everyone can be perfect like you, Mike. Not everyone can just magically build a successful business. Some of us have to try different things. Take risks. Taking risks with your own money is one thing, I shot back. Risking our parents' house because you're too proud to get a regular job is something else entirely. The family dinner was officially ruined. Kevin stormed out, slamming doors and peeling out of the driveway in his leased BMW. The rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence, picking at our cooling turkey. Dad finally spoke up. Mike, we owe you an apology. We haven't been fair to you. Mom was crying. I had no idea you'd built something so successful. I'm so sorry we never asked, never paid attention, but I wasn't interested in apologies anymore. I was interested in protecting my parents from financial disaster. Dad, you need to cancel that home equity loan immediately. Don't give Kevin a penny, but we already signed the papers. The money's already been transferred to Kevin's business account. My heart sank. How much? The full $120,000. He said he needed it right away to secure the initial inventory shipments. I closed my eyes. Kevin had taken $120,000 of their home equity, and knowing Kevin, it was probably already spent on paying down his debts, not on any legitimate business expenses. I need to make some calls, I said. Over the next 3 days, I did more research into Kevin's artisan imports business than he'd apparently done himself. What I found was exactly what I expected. No business license, no registered company, no signed agreements with South American suppliers, no contracts with US retailers. Just a fancy business plan he'd probably copied from a template online. The $120,000 was gone, spent on exactly what I'd suspected. He'd used $78,000 to pay off his credit cards and make a big dent in his student loans. Another $25,000 went to paying off his car lease early, so he could buy it outright. The remaining $17,000 had been spent on what he called business development, which appeared to be a trip to Peru to take photos of pottery for his fake business presentation. When I presented this information to my parents, Dad literally aged 10 years in front of me. Mom started making calls to their bank, their lawyer, anyone who might be able to help them get their money back. But the money was gone. Kevin had spent it, and there was no legitimate business to show for it. Worse, the home equity loan meant they now had a monthly payment of almost $800, and they were both retired on fixed incomes. That's when the begging started. First, it was Mom calling, crying about how they might lose the house, how they'd trusted Kevin and now they didn't know what to do, how they were too old to start over financially. Then it was Dad, taking a different approach, talking about family responsibility, how successful family members should help struggling ones, how I had more money than I could ever spend, and they just needed help getting back on their feet. Kevin stayed away for 2 weeks, then started sending text messages, first apologizing, then explaining, then justifying, then begging. He'd learned about my business, about my house, about my actual financial situation, and suddenly I was his potential savior. The texts started reasonable. I'm sorry I doubted you. I had no idea you'd built something so successful. I'm proud of you. Then moved to explanatory. The import business is still viable. I just need more time to develop the supplier relationships. The Peru trip was research, not vacation. Then got desperate. Mike, I know I messed up, but
Why do we browse like this? Hunting, clicking, searching. What if we could just say, hey, Copilot. And now, that hoodie you saw, found. Your inbox, cleared. Dinner party for 7, one oven? Easy. And that walking tour? Planned. With no backtracking and the best burger.
Anything else I can help you with?
Yes. Can you go through the...
But I can fix this. If you loan me just $50,000, I can make the import business work and pay back mom and dad. And finally became pathetic. Please don't let mom and dad lose their house because of my mistakes. You're the only one who can help them now. I ignored all of it. Instead, I hired a forensic accountant to trace exactly where the $120,000 had gone. I wanted documentation of every dollar before deciding how to handle the situation. The results were damning. Not only had Kevin spent the money exactly as I'd suspected, but he'd also been lying about his financial situation for years. The $128,000 in debt he'd admitted to at Thanksgiving was actually over $180,000 when you included debts to friends, family, and some questionable payday loan companies. Armed with this information, I made a decision. I called a family meeting at my new house. I wanted them to see what actual success looked like, what building something real over time could accomplish. They arrived on a cold December Sunday, looking small and overwhelmed as they walked through my front door. Mom gasped at the foyer, the grand staircase, the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dad just looked around in quiet amazement. Kevin came too, tail between his legs, humble for maybe the first time in his adult life. I laid out everything on my dining room table. Bank records showing Kevin's spending. Business registration documents showing there was no artisan imports company. Credit reports showing the full extent of his debts. Here's the situation, I said. Kevin took your $120,000 and spent it paying off his own debts, not starting any business. He owes over $180,000 total when you include everything. There is no import business, no South American suppliers, no retail partnerships. Mom started crying again. Dad looked like he wanted to strangle Kevin, but I wasn't done. However, I continued, I'm prepared to make you an offer. They all looked up hopefully. Kevin will sign over power of attorney to me for all his financial affairs. He'll move back in with you, get a regular job, and follow a strict budget that I create. Every penny he earns above basic living expenses goes toward paying you back. Kevin started to protest, but I held up my hand. In exchange, I'll pay off your home equity loan, $120,000, transferred to your bank tomorrow morning. Your house is safe. The relief on my parents' faces was immediate, but Kevin looked panicked. Mike, I can't sign over power of attorney. I'm an adult. I have rights. You have the right to declare bankruptcy and let mom and dad lose their house? I agreed. Your choice. He tried a different approach. What about my business plans? What about my potential? I laughed. Kevin, you're 29 years old and you've never held a job for more than 8 months. You've never successfully completed any business venture. You just stole $120,000 from our retired parents to pay off your credit card debt. Your potential is to work at a regular job like a normal person. But I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're a scammer who finally ran out of victims. That was harsh, but it needed to be said. For 15 years, I'd watched my family enable Kevin's delusions while dismissing my actual accomplishments. Someone had to inject reality into the situation. Kevin signed the papers. Not happily, but he signed them. The next morning, I transferred $120,000 to my parents' bank account to pay off their home equity loan. That afternoon, I moved Kevin into a studio apartment near a distribution center where I'd arranged a job for him as a warehouse associate. Starting salary, $16 an hour. The same job I'd started with 15 years earlier. Over the next few months, the family dynamic completely shifted. My parents, grateful and embarrassed, started showing genuine interest in my business. They asked questions, visited my facilities, met my employees. For the first time in my adult life, they seemed proud of what I'd built. Kevin, meanwhile, was learning what actual work looked like. 40 hours a week, time clocks, supervisors, overtime when necessary. No flexible schedule, no creative freedom, no get-rich-quick schemes. He hated every minute of it. But he was paying off his debt, $400 per week after basic living expenses. At that rate, he'd pay back the $120,000 in about 6 years, plus interest. The best part was watching him realize what I'd known all along. Building something real takes time, patience, and consistent effort. There are no shortcuts to genuine success. My parents now introduce me as our son Mike, who owns a successful trucking company. They ask about my employees, my business challenges, my expansion plans. They're genuinely interested in my life for the first time since I was 12 years old. Kevin still sends me occasional texts about business opportunities and investment ideas. I ignore them all. He's got 6 years of warehouse work ahead of him, and maybe by the end of it, he'll understand the difference between actual entrepreneurship and fantasy. Update 1. Kevin lasted exactly 4 months at the warehouse job before quitting, because manual labor is beneath him. He's now working at a call center and complaining that the customers are rude. Some people never learn. Update 2. Since a few people asked for more details about how things played out with Kevin, here's the full story of his spectacular failure to adult properly. Those first 4 months at the warehouse were entertaining. I'd set up the job through a contact of mine who manages the distribution center, so I got regular updates on Kevin's performance. Week 1,
Don't hurt him, Kev. All dripped up. Got the new iPhone 17 Pro and
Kevin showed up in business casual clothes like he was heading to a corporate meeting. Had to be told multiple times that khakis and button-downs weren't appropriate for loading trucks. Complained that the uniform polo shirts were not his style and asked if he could wear his own shirts as long as they were the right color. Week 2, he started showing up late consistently. Not massively late, just 5 to 10 minutes, but enough to irritate his supervisor. When called out on it, Kevin explained that he's not really a morning person and suggested they accommodate his natural schedule by letting him start later and work later. In a job that requires coordination with truck schedules. Yeah, by week 3, Kevin had convinced himself that his college degree and business experience made him management material. He started offering unsolicited suggestions about workflow optimization and employee scheduling. His supervisor, a guy named Rodriguez, who's been doing this for 15 years, was not impressed. Rodriguez told me later, "Your brother keeps trying to redesign our entire operation based on something he read online. Kid's been here 3 weeks and thinks he knows better than people who've been doing this since before he was born." Week 4 was when Kevin discovered he actually had to do physical work, like consistently, for 8 hours straight. For 8. The job involved moving boxes that weighed up to 50 pounds, and Kevin had clearly never lifted anything heavier than his laptop. He started complaining about back pain, asked if there was a gym membership benefit so he could build up to the physical requirements, and suggested they invest in better ergonomic equipment. Month 2, Kevin tried to organize a union, not because of legitimate workplace issues, but because he thought having union organizing experience would look good on his resume for future business ventures. The attempt lasted exactly 1 lunch break before his coworkers told him to knock it off. He also kept trying to network with truck drivers, thinking he could learn about transportation industry opportunities. Most of our drivers have been doing this for decades and could spot Kevin's BS from a mile away. One driver, Tommy, told me, "Your brother asked me if I knew about any disruptive transportation technologies he could invest in. Kid doesn't even know how to properly load a truck, but he wants to revolutionize the industry." Month 3 was when Kevin discovered that warehouse work doesn't stop for personal convenience. He requested time off for a business conference, which turned out to be a cryptocurrency seminar he'd paid $200 to attend. When told he couldn't have the time off without advance notice, he called in sick. His supervisor checked his Instagram and found photos of Kevin at the conference, networking and posting about exploring investment opportunities. The final straw came in month 4. Kevin had been assigned to train a new hire, which he saw as validation that management recognized his potential. Instead of actually training the guy, Kevin spent the shift explaining his various business ideas and trying to recruit the new employee as a potential business partner. When the new hire couldn't properly do his job because Kevin had spent 0 time actually teaching him warehouse procedures, both Kevin and the new guy got called into the supervisor's office. Kevin tried to explain that he was developing the employee's entrepreneurial mindset and that traditional training was limiting his potential. Rodriguez finally lost it, told Kevin that this was a warehouse, not a business incubator, and that his job was to move boxes, not pitch investment schemes to new employees. Kevin quit the next day, claiming the work environment was stifling his creativity and incompatible with his professional development goals.
From hoses to hand tools, lighting to ladders, Grainger has the right stuff right when you need it, so you can fix, build, maintain, and more. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Cole, he's my miracle child. was important.
Don't tell the others. I'm rooting for you. Your minions really pulled their weight.
Praise the abyss.
Singing the deep blues. That'll do some damage. Sorry about the peanut shells on the floor. These minions are slobs. You're doing great out there. of these recruits.
Ebb and flow.
I think you can win this thing.